Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on the theme Possibilities for Collaboration in Teacher Education and R&D. This event is part of the India Week 2020, organized by the Australia-India Institute, University of Melbourne, in collaboration with OP Jindal Global University. India Week is organized every year, highlighting contemporary Indian culture, thought, politics, and society. It aims to promote mutual understanding between Australia and India, increase engagement with Indian culture, and strengthen people-to-people links between two countries. We are happy to announce that this year, several schools, research centers, and institutes of OP Jindal Global University is collaborating with the Australia-India Institute to host a series of webinar discussions. My name is Tatiana Belousova. I am an assistant professor and assistant director at the International Institute for Higher Education Research and Capacity Building, OP Jindal Global University. I will be moderating this webinar. Now let me introduce to you the distinguished panelists for our discussion today. Dr. Vanessa Fernandez. She is a lecturer and researcher in the field of leadership studies with an emphasis on school improvement and school effectiveness studies. She's particularly interested in looking at organizational change and development within the field of education, both in Australia and internationally. Having an extensive experience of almost 2 decades in schools in Australia and overseas, in teaching and leadership roles, her perspectives on educational research, policy, and practice are situated actively as an insider-outsider. The voice of the practitioner and their perspectives come out stronger in her published works. Vanessa specializes in organizational case studies and predominantly research in that field, bringing in both institutional ethnographic and phenomenological thinking to give voice to the lived experiences of stakeholders in education. Vanessa has previously been a school reviewer for the Department of Education and Training in Victoria. Since 2014, she has worked with the Monash team in delivering a principal preparation program for aspirants in the public sector of education. Now, let me introduce to you Dr. Moshmi Mukherjee. She is an associate professor and deputy director at the International Institute for Higher Education Research and Capacity Building. She is also the founding executive director of the Center for Comparative and Global Education, OP Jindal Global University. Moshmi is a Fulbright scholar and a fellow and India country director of the Star Scholars Network. She has comparative experience in teacher education within the higher education sector in India, United States, and Australia. Her research expertise is in the field of education policy and leadership, and comparative and international education. She has worked as a consultant with UNESCO IEP for the Plan for Learning e-portal. Recently, she has also worked as an external resource person with the National Council for Educational Research and Training to design and co-author a handbook on global citizenship education for upper primary school teachers in India, which was awarded last year by UNESCO Asia Pacific Center of Education for International Understanding. Now, let me tell you a few words about the topic that we are going to discuss today. Research on the factors that lead to the successful cross-border research collaboration has demonstrated that solidarity, emotional energy, motivation, trust, and ethical practice play a key role. Each of these aspects can be adversely affected due to the differences in social, academic, and institutional cultural practices in different countries. During our discussion today, we will hear from 2 research partners from Australia and India about what worked to establish their research partnership, irrespective of wide differences in social, academic, and institutional cultural practices in both countries. Now, let me start with the first question. Would you mind sharing with us what worked for both of you to initiate your research partnership at the initial stage?
That's a really good question, Tatiana. I would really request my partner and colleague at Monash, Vanessa, to first respond, and then I'll follow her, because the initial invitation I got actually from Vanessa, and that was 5 years ago when I was back in Melbourne at the last stage, finishing up my doctoral thesis. And Vanessa was going to tell you more how we got introduced and who introduced us, which has helped build our relationship over the years. Vanessa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mousumi, and thank you, Tatiana, for the introduction as well. Well, it was someone who is well respected by both of us and whom we consider as a mentor and a giant in the field. That is Professor Fazil Rizvi. He was actually the one that introduced me to yourself, and you came with glowing words. Let me just tell you that as well. And when I look back on it over the last 5 years, I think what he envisioned and saw as having two South Asian women connecting together, whether they were in the same hemisphere of the globe or in opposite hemispheres, could bring about good stuff. And I really have to thank him for that. But it's been a beautiful journey of 5 years with you, Mossumi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vanessa. As Vanessa just shared, frankly speaking, we were introduced. In fact, we were introduced virtually. And actually, our relationship has been primarily virtual so far, Vanessa, isn't it? So we were introduced by my PhD supervisor in Melbourne for a book project that Vanessa was working at the time on school leadership, and she was seeking authors, contributors to contribute for her book project, and specifically as a doctoral candidate whose thesis focused on examining issues related to school leadership and policy. My PhD supervisor, Professor Rizvi, I can see he's here with us in this meeting room. Really excited. Thank you so much, Fazil, for joining this session. We are both thrilled. We are both remembering the day you introduced us over the email for Vanessa's book project. It's been a very long journey together with regards to Vanessa's book project and now the new research project that we are planning together. And thank you so much for introducing both of us. And we are going to share more about our journey through this entire webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, then let me move on with the second question, and that would be how both of you were able to overcome the differences in social, academic, and institutional cultural practices in both countries.
Well, as you have already, all of you have heard from both of us that we were initially introduced when both of us were actually based in Melbourne. Though, as I mentioned, quite interestingly, though I was in Melbourne for almost like 4 or 5 years, we never actually met each other. So yeah, our interactions while we were both in Melbourne has been actually mostly virtually over the phone, through emails, but we never got an opportunity to actually face-to-face meet each other, I think, and that's quite significant, I think, in the current context of the pandemic, when most of us are feeling limited because the fact that we have to maintain social, I don't like using the word social, rather physical distancing, in order to interact with people and build relationships and maintain relationships. Well, our relationship has been literally virtual for the entire 5 years that we know each other. And in terms of academic cultural differences, that the point that you have raised, which the research literature is telling us, something that acts as a barrier for building successful research collaboration. Well, since I had already been part of the Indian higher education system before I moved abroad for higher studies and work for a significant period of time, so I personally had a comparative understanding even when I returned to India again and continued to maintain this relationship with Vanessa. Of course, I am located currently at a university in India, which is a little bit different from the mainstream public and private education, higher education system within the larger Indian context. Some of the stark structural differences that are there, cultural differences that are there between the systems is not as much with the current institution where I'm working. But still, since our relationship grew over time and since we came to know each other before I moved back to India and right now located at a higher education institution in India, I think that did help in overcoming some of those initial barriers that people face in terms of cultural differences and also communication gap. Also, when you're communicating with people across boundaries of nation states. Vanessa, what do you think? What, from your perspective, I think you also had a very yourself coming from this region of the world. Would you like to add something to this question?
Yes, for sure. So my background is South Asian, and I'm an Anglo-Indian from South Asia with a little bit from Sri Lanka, a little bit from India, and a lot of it from Pakistan because I was born in Pakistan and grew up there. Uh, but having that multiple perspectives actually helps you to look at yourself and your own positionality as a researcher as being someone who is global and yet identifies with the local. And I think that becomes really important. Seeking out Professor Rizvi was really because I saw the corpus of work that he had done and was very impressed with that. And that's why I wanted to connect with him. And I think that would be something that I would encourage all ECRs to do, because that was that was during my stage of being an ECR. The cultural differences for Mousumi and me did not exist because we and I know I'm stressing about Professor Rizvi, but I think this is really important for those of us who want to build these bridges, that there are people positioned, and in the future probably Mousumi and myself will be positioned similarly, who can make this happen. Now, giving credit to Mousumi, so at the individual level, it was very easy to work with her and to, have a common platform of understanding. And I think that was our past similar experiences that we had. I think it was the sense of humor that was there as well. It was this respect for the mentor that we had as common mentor, but it was also her warm personality and openness to learn. And that's what I had within myself. And I think that becomes critical when you're trying to have any partnership, even if it's located in the same state or country. It's very important to have that kind of relationship that's collaborative, yes, respectful, and honest. And I think that would be critical. And then I think we are both blessed with the universities that we are currently working at, because they do have platforms that allow us to be able to build these bridges together. So it hasn't been a whole lot of heavy lifting for us because we have that support as well. And I've been very impressed with what OP General offers Mousumi and then what she offers to our project together.
Thank you, Dr. Moshmi. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Fernandez. Speaking about the platforms you have just mentioned, let us dig a little bit deeper into this. So my thought question would be, what are the commonalities between Indian and Australian education systems that provide this platform for research collaboration between two countries?
I think we have lots of problems that are common. And so as researchers, if we've got the finger on the pulse, and if that is an area of interest for us, then that becomes the common ground that you have, the complexity of education, many problems that we are facing, many opportunities, like Mousumi mentioned, the fact that we have technology and we've not met in person and have grown to be really close friends as well as colleagues over the time. this all, yeah, it just helps to further strengthen that whole case. Also, over to you.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Uh, there are, in terms of, you see, what the going back to the theme, the title of today's discussion with regards to teacher education and in the area of research and development, I think there is a lot that we can do collaboratively. And in spite of the superficial actually differences, if you think about India and Australia, they seem to be like poles apart, frankly speaking. But many of the challenges, despite the apparent differences, many of the challenges that we face, there are commonalities in some of the challenges that we face. And we have just had long discussions, Vanessa and I, even while we were working together for her book project on school leadership, and going back and forth with regards to the chapter that I contributed for that book project. And this is how the entire discussion developed into that why not we do something really together, further focusing on the challenges of school leadership itself. In diverse contexts, because when we see from outside, we look at the country at large, Australia at large, or India at large. But within these individual country contexts, also there are a great deal of diversity of schools and systems of schools and the kind of challenges that school leaders face in these institutions. And it's important to recognize these internal diversities, and also at the same time, this takes me back once again, reminds me of a report that my PhD supervisor, Professor Fazil Rizvi, and a few colleagues at Melbourne, we put together, looking at some of the possibilities that could be found in terms of developing programs together, specifically in the area of teacher education, research and development, because this is a need area in both the country contexts, and also despite the parent differences, there are quite a bit of similarity, which we even highlighted in that report, because of the historic legacy of both the countries under the British Empire at one point of time. The kind of schools and schooling systems that we have, there is a great deal of similarity also. So there is a lot that could be done, but we have to find creative ways to actually explore and build on those relationships, to work together despite the apparent difficulties. Yesterday, when we were having a discussion, unfortunately, Vanessa, that book you worked very hard to send to me, it's right now in my office shelf, so I couldn't get the book to display here on the screen. The kind of hurdles Vanessa had to go through to even send the book after the book was published to me. There's the book. And how many emails back and forth we had to go through to get the book delivered to me. It's many people would just drop it like that. Okay, it's over and out. And I really admire and appreciate your patience, Vanessa, that you made it a point that the hard copy of the book, I did have soft copy, of course, but the hard copy of the book should reach me. So to go that extra mile, to respond in between all the busy work schedule, to respond to all those emails, somewhere in customs and courier. It was somewhere stuck between customs and courier system, right, across the two countries, for reasons we couldn't comprehend initially, so all these, there, as I said, there are differences, but at the same time, there are some similarities of challenges in these contexts. And a lot also would depend on I should say that the persistence of the collaborators to overcome those challenges and to decide to work together to explore some of those common challenges together, examine some of those common challenges together. Thank you.
We had to chuckle when we were talking about the book, that this was in a pre-COVID era, and that almost seems like another lifetime. But I think the big message out here about looking at commonalities is really building within yourself as a researcher this desire to be open in what you're going to explore, and to be able to listen to your partners on what they are wanting to do, what they're seeing as their vision, and then to see how much of what you're wanting to do you can align with them. And that becomes a really important part of any partnership where there is a lot of differences, and we both recognize those differences, but being able to recognize how we have a common vision becomes really important, and where we share the passion. And those are the kinds of conversations and dialogue that you need to have with partners when you're setting out on a research journey. The journey will not be easy, let me just say that. There are many complexities. Even for us, COVID has thrown in complexities galore. But even in that space, we have looked through something that we've laughed together at, innovative disruption, and we've used the lens of innovative disruption to be able to see how we could keep the partnership still going when the world went on pause.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I really respect you for that, Mousumi, for being flexible and not inflexible, and for being open and also willing to take that innovative, disruptive journey this year.
Thank you. Thank you. This reminds me also of another incident, and this can happen in any research collaboration or any which leads on to any kind of publication in the future. Something which, as I have personally read some of the literature, often acts as a barrier in terms of developing a relationship of trust and solidarity. Now, with regards to even the initial book project that we worked together, Vanessa, initially the publisher that, under which she was planning to publish the book, over the period of time in the process of writing the chapters for the books and the review and all these things, the publisher changed, and we got these email. And often these kind of things can lead to misunderstandings among partners who are working together across different borders, differences of borders and cultures and all kinds of differences. But since we had already established open conversation right at the very beginning of our relationship, we have been both of us, we have been very open in terms of how we communicated with each other. We followed through. Often these kind of things, grant relating to grant applications, publishers, and all kinds of things that can throw challenges in front of you, which you might not imagine at the beginning, at the start. But to overcome those challenges together and to trust each other is, I think, very, very important aspect. Something, Tatiana, you highlighted at the very beginning. The research is also telling us a strong trust and solidarity, and very, very important to build on these relationships.
Thank you very much, our respected panelists, for your illuminating and open responses. Thank you so much. Now, let me come to the next question, which would be about ethical practice. That's what I mentioned already in the introductory part, but let us elaborate further on that. So when we talk about the ethical practice to be followed within joint research projects, what should be the main aspects to be observed?
Right. I don't mind speaking to this first. When you are in a partnership, you have to be able to give the space to allow partners to grow, because growth does happen over time. And in that growth, you do learn of each other's institutions and the kinds of capabilities that the institution has, and also the kinds of opportunities that the institutions are willing to offer. And so you have to be patient. Uh, I would say that becomes a critical aspect of a partnership that's international, is to for partners to be able to be patient. We're not always all on the same page, and we need to be flexible. So giving that permission to grow is really important. For me personally, working with Mousumi was working with Mousumi. It was working with the person that I was interested in working with what she was offering in her positioning, and how she was, and I had read up on her as well, on what she was positioning herself in offering to India. And that was where I found that was something that was really strong. And like I said earlier, having that common vision, because that is something that is similar for me in my own interest for South Asia. It has the book itself. I contributed a chapter in another book, but this book itself, it was looking at the region and seeing how can we build collaboration together. And I think that becomes really important. Now, coming to your question about ethical practices, as you get to know your partners and you get to know the institutions that they are working in, you get to learn of the ethical strengths as well as constraints that you might face. And again, the communication, if that's open, if it's transparent, the collaboration can be strong. And I think that was something that came across. We were, in either case, letting each other know what our institutions expected from us. And I'm very impressed with what OP Jindal offers Mousumi again, because she has always been able to really be at par with things that we could do. So we could move ahead. And that's my bit. Over to you, Mousumi.
Yes. Thank you, Vanessa, for sharing your thoughts. Of course, ethical practice with regards to research is absolutely very, very important, whether you do it individually or in collaboration as a team. And specifically, if you're working across different institutions and also country contexts, each and every institution within each and every country has different kind of protocols, official ethical protocols that you have to follow. And nowadays, in terms of data sharing across, and also how do you how do you even share data with each other across the boundaries, across the borders? All these things have also, as Vanessa highlighted, with the advancement in information and communication technology, cloud space, and all these resources that are available to us now, it has become much easier, frankly speaking, to do these things. And at the same time, in institution like ours, we have these institutional processes and systems also, like the Institutional Ethics Board, to really look at the ethical aspect to very in a very transparent way, and to do deliberations and discussions also on the ethical aspects of the collaborative research projects before the project would start rolling. So these kind of institutional processes are important, which both of us, we have it in our institutions. And at the same time, the kind of resources that are now available with regards to cloud space storage and secure data systems through which we can securely share data across with each other. These things have also, I think, in a big way, they are facilitators if you would like to see in terms of any kind of cross-border collaboration where the research partners are actually not located within one institution, or it could be even within one country. Both India and Australia are very big, large countries. It could be somewhere, in the state of Darwin, a collaboration with the faculty, or somewhere within India, somewhere in Kanyakumari or in Kashmir. But you don't need to always physically travel and commute now with all the facilities that are available with regards to information and communication technology. And as I have highlighted right at the beginning of this discussion, because this is happening in the middle of a pandemic where we are feeling limited in many ways because of the physical restrictions on physical mobility, that my relationship with Vanessa has actually started virtually and is growing virtually over the past 5 years, from a book project that she was working on, and then me contributing out of my doctoral thesis to another project that we are rolling out together right now.
Now, thank you very much. Thank you again for your wonderful responses. Now, let me kindly request our respective audience, if you have any questions, then please place them in the chat box and I will try to address them at a later stage. So this is my kind request to the audience. I will be looking forward to your questions, and I'm sure the distinguished panelists as well. Now let me move on with the questions, and then the next one, which is number 5, it will be which steps should be taken both on individual and institutional levels to enhance the research collaboration between India and Australia, especially in the field of teacher education and research and development.
Vanessa?
You want to go first on? Oh, I can.
You can, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think as I think about it, I think it's very important. It's very important for the people, the partners, of course, to get along. That goes without saying. But then it's also important if institutions can also develop spaces for bridges like this to be built, because it is that elasticity of globalized higher education institutions that actually help to build these bridges. And when, so what am I trying to say out here? I'm trying to say that there is a certain amount of leverage that you need from your institution that will then help you to go out and pursue such relationships. In both our cases, it was really pleasing to note that we did have that leverage. Our institutions were encouraging us to look global and to look local as well. And that becomes really important. So yes, I guess that is what if I look ahead in Australia and India collaboration, I would look ahead at the responsibility of higher education institutions in helping their early career researchers or their mid-career researchers or their experienced researchers to have these spaces where they are allowed to grow and to develop their own potential as a researcher. Over to you, Mousumi.
Thank you, Vanessa. I totally agree with you. I remember last year, I think sometime towards the beginning of the fall semester, when you first sent me, or maybe over the summer, when you first sent me your proposal for the current project to develop it in a comparative perspective with my involvement from India. And you even shared all your documents, which even your ethics clearance and everything from Monash, all those documents. I immediately forwarded it to the director of our International Institute of Higher Education, under whom both Tatiana and I work. And those who don't know about it, the director of our institute is also the vice chancellor of this university. The moment I forwarded Vanessa's email asking him, should I go ahead? And he's like, go ahead. That's it. He is, I should acknowledge this, a very, very supportive and proactive kind of person who is, as a leader, very much wants the university to be global in every sense, at the same time being, as Vanessa said, rooted in the local context here in Sonipat, Haryana. And I took it forward, and including our director of the Office of Doctoral Studies, who got really interested into the project and decided to put an advertisement to recruit doctoral students to work under the project. So this kind of proactive institutional support, I think, is extremely important. Because external grants, of course, from both our sides, we have been trying to apply also for external grants and funding to take the project forward, but they are often extremely competitive, and it's not always to be 100% successful, in pulling in external grant, though we are doing our best to do that. But some level of internal institutional support to facilitate these kind of partnerships and collaborations is, I think, extremely, extremely helpful. To have to work under a supervisor who is proactive in promoting and furthering these kind of relationship, and to have institutional leaders in different departments proactive in facilitating this kind of partnership and leadership for collaboration is, I think, extremely, extremely important.
Yes, and I have to add again, the whole idea of disruptive innovation became a strength because when Mousumi decided to add the PhD students in there, the richness of what their studies will contribute to the overall project and how it spreads out across the world is in itself going to be something that we are very excitingly looking forward to it. And again, I think that you've said it well, Mousumi. It is not just the researcher operating by themselves, but it is the institution
Right.
as well in supporting and providing those links. And I'd also like to thank Melbourne University for organizing this week, because it is platforms such as this that get us to learn from one another. And I remember sitting and listening to others about their research design, and it was so good on what you brought up just now about not being bogged down by we have to first get a huge or a humongous external grant and then we can go ahead and start the project, but actually flipping it and saying, let's start the project and the money will come. So we've got trust in the partners, we've understood the institution, we're giving ourselves spaces to grow, we're using disruptive innovation to help us to look at new research designs, and all of this just helps us to extend that project further.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The next question is related to our current COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, but I think it would be useful to get your insights on that as well. So what impact would COVID-19 pandemic have on the future of Australia-India joint research projects?
It will have only as much impact as the two of us will let it have. So we can be strategic and we can use it to our advantage. And we have used this year of pause to actually help us to look at setting up the background, the background and you know, leveling the field and preparing the field for the project itself. So we could have looked at this as a hurdle and as a blockage, but instead it has allowed us to even think up of more new opportunities of what else can be included in the research design. And even for us who sit in Australia across two different universities partnering together and then partnering out in the world with all our partners, it was a time where we relooked at our research design. We found areas that we thought were weak, and we strengthened those areas and put in ethics applications to strengthen those areas. So COVID-19's impact can only be as much as we want it to impact us. I think there is a bit of a rebel inside me that always will push out and say, yeah, so the external can only influence me to the extent that I want it to influence me.
True, true.
These are fascinating words.
True. In fact, something, Vanessa, yesterday also when we were talking over the phone, we discussed, and this is something we discussed before also. Before, actually, this is something we discussed even before the COVID pandemic, that we will be doing some reading and discussion sessions online using platforms like that, like the one that we are using now for this webinar. And we'll also involve the doctoral students in those sessions, like a series of seminars, reading up some of the literature, relevant literature, both the analytical literature and also literature related to the theme and topic of our research. And we will be doing some reading and discussion sessions involving the doctoral students also, right? To not just leave everything and sit at home just because we can't do the work out there in the field, because our research is very much field-based research. To utilize this time to do a lot of the background work and then move ahead. Take this pause, a time to think and reflect, and then move ahead.
Very nice. Sounds wonderful. Thanks a lot. My next question would be, where do you see the prospects of Indo-Australian research and development collaboration going forward?
Mhm.
Well,
prospects on this front.
yeah, I think the new COVID recovery stage, as we see the world recollecting itself and alliances being strengthened and old alliances being strengthened and new alliances being made, I think we're at a very interesting juncture in time where the world is looking at building such kind of collaboration. So I think there is really strong scope, not only just for our project, but for anyone sitting here today thinking of having a similar collaborative project. I would like to encourage you that there is scope. This is the right time. There is a lot of negotiations happening between Australia and India, and definitely taking that macro perspective in when you're designing your research helps the flow of the research to go with what's happening globally as well. And so it's less swimming upstream, but
Mm-hmm.
it's swimming in stream.
Mm-hmm. I would like to add here very much, you see, many of you might know that in India right now, very recently, a new national education policy has been legislated. And under the new national education policy, the recommendations under the higher education, teacher education has been given a lot of emphasis and scope for improvement. Some of the reasons, there actually has been a lot of literature to say the successive national education policies post-independence in India and the national curriculum frameworks have not achieved the goals that they had set to achieve, primarily because of the problematic of teacher education and the really need for overhaul overall overhaul of the teacher education system within the country, which is really not in a very, except for some centers of excellence like CIE at the University of Delhi, and or say, for example, the National Institute of Education Planning and Administration in Delhi, and a few other departments of education across the country. Except for like handful of them, large majority of them are very, very poor quality. And the NEP clause 15 specifically focuses, it goes at great length to recommend different kinds of possibilities of overhauling the teacher education, which includes school leadership, training of school leadership and teachers, administrators to overall school improvement, something Vanessa has been working on for a long time, because we cannot improve the higher education system with a poor school education system. So the NEP takes really a systemic approach in connecting the school over and over again. In NEP, this is the first time in NEP 2020, they over and over again, they have tried to connect the school education system with the higher education system in all the recommendations, and created a separate clause with a lot of suggestions and recommendations in there for the overall overhaul of the entire teacher education system. So far, many of these teacher education institutes have been actually operating like little islands in isolation, rather than being part of comprehensive multidisciplinary university. One of the recommendations of NEP 2020 is to actually incorporate these isolated teachers training institutes as part of multidisciplinary comprehensive universities, so that there is overall quality improvement in the teacher education institutes, which have been operating in isolation so far. And the quality has been very, very poor, except for a few handfuls. So I think there is a lot of room and scope for collaboration in this particular area of research and development, and also overall school improvement and teacher education.
May I ask you, what are your plans for the near future in terms of partnership between both of you, and also at the institutional level between Monash University and OP Jindal Global University? So do you have any particular plans for the near future, the way you would like to collaborate further?
I think, yeah, we have lots of plans. It's just that at the moment, with seeing the very real experiences that we're having with the pandemic, we've had to tell ourselves that some plans that were immediate in the near future have now gone ahead and are there for perhaps 2021 or 2022 as such. But then again, like I said earlier, there are many others, and Mousumi also mentioned it, there are many other ways in which we're working together. So we're looking at enhancing the capabilities of the researchers on teams, right? And getting them together. We're looking at opportunities of workshopping together. We're looking at opportunities of publishing together, of learning from each other, of the contextual significance in which the study is situated, and therefore learning from each other. I was invited to this presentation by Mousumi, and it once again goes ahead to just strengthen the understanding that we have around the project. So yes, about how do we involve OP Jindal and Monash University, look, the sky's the limit. If I could get her and her whole team on a plane and bring them here and have a beautiful symposium, I would love to do that. But the reality is that we have to just see how the pandemic rolls out. But the sky's the limit.
Mm-hmm. And we actually already have very good established relationship with Monash. Our law school does a lot of partnership work already with Monash Law School, and we do have an established partnership. Some of the other schools have been also doing work with different faculty at Monash. And with regards to our partnership, we even talked about something which for which we are really looking forward to some grants, some support. Let's see if it comes up. We are also thinking of doing a principals colloquium together, bringing together Australian and Indian school principals. At least 100 of them, 50 from Australia, 50 from India to begin with. Sometime early next year, we were planning to do that. And then with the pandemic, we were thinking, can we do this also virtually? Is it possible? So we will explore those possibilities as part of the partnership, and let's see what future holds. But there's no doubt about the fact that there's a lot of synergy. And there is also institutional support from both of our institutions, which has been already working in other disciplines and areas for a while now in partnership.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moshmi and Dr. Vanessa. Really appreciate your answers. I hope our audience as well. So my last question today for our webinar would be to you. What would be your advice to those researchers from both India and Australia who so far haven't been engaged in any joint research project, but are very much willing to do so? So what would be your advice for them? Yeah, how to go about, where to start?
I think in my own particular case, I would say it is important to know again what your own passion is, how you look at yourself as a researcher, and what it is that your contribution is going to be to the field of education. And then to, as an architect, start building liaisons with others. In my case, it was finding Professor Fazal Rizvi and a number of other people who became mentors for myself and helped me to go slow and steady, right? But having said that, not to go so slow that you go nowhere, you know? So there is a certain balance of how slow is slow, and to reach out to others. Pardon me. It really depends on how far you are willing to take the risk of moving into the unknown. You can take some measured risks and you can take some unmeasured risks. And the book itself was an interesting experience in itself. With another colleague, we got together and we looked for people across Asia Pacific. And some of those people we had never known before. It was literally like writing an email out there and putting it into ether. But it worked, and the book was a beautiful collaboration, and the continuation of a 5-year friendship has been one of the good outcomes of that collaboration. But that's what I mean. You can work slow, but you need to know who you want to be as a researcher and what you want your contribution to be, and then it's almost like finding your tribe after that. And these research collaborations become opportunities of finding your tribe, both within your own country and across the region, and even from the country or the region that you first belong to, as in my case.
True. I would agree with what Vanessa said, frankly speaking. To find your tribe, I think I would take that quote from her, Vanessa, quote unquote. It's, I think, very important to find your tribe. First, think about what specific contribution you want to make as a researcher and scholar, and then to form a sense of, to form a community. reaching out to those people who you think could be good mentors. And even with regards to me, all my academic relationships, this is how it has been built. Right. I don't come from an academic family background. I'm mentioning family because right now I'm located in India, and family often within the larger Indian context, as Tatiana you also know very well, plays a key role in socializing people, even with regards to professional socializing. Right. The film stars, kids, they all become film stars, cricketers, it's like politicians, their kids become, so it's like becomes like a family tradition almost. Professions, the way people get socialized into certain professions. I don't come from an academic family background at all. But I had an idea about what my passion is all about and what I wanted to contribute as a academic, as a scholar, and I have been personally proactive in reaching out, though my initial higher education and training within the Indian context, higher education is often looked at something which is a very individual sort of pursuits, particularly in social sciences and humanities. In sciences, of course, the collaboration is key. You work in a laboratory, you work in a team with a team of researchers. The discipline itself demands collaboration right from the beginning of your career, but not so much as in in social sciences also to some extent, in some context, but within the larger Indian context, even social sciences along with humanities have been in research, means research and scholarship very much of an individual pursuit of academics, where collaboration often doesn't play into, and often people are very suspicious of collaboration also. People think about intellectual property and all these kind of things, but for me, um, I have always, even while I was back in India many years ago, my professors back at Calcutta University, undergraduate professors I've worked with, they know very well. I've been always a very proactive person in reaching out and building relationships with people, especially those who I thought could be a mentor for me, because I didn't have that family mentorship into initiating me in an academic profession. And that has also helped me in developing and building on these post PhD relationships and partnerships with Vanessa. I'm also working with a few other colleagues in other parts of the world, and this is what I think is important, to be proactive, to build, to have that openness, I think is very important, and also to be a good listener. I think for both Vanessa and me, it worked very well. We always kept our conversations very open, and we have also been good listener to understand the challenges and hurdles as they have popped up on the way. So I think that is very, very important to build the aspects of trust and solidarity that Tatiana you highlighted at the beginning, which research is telling us often partnerships fall apart because of those key elements and missing.
Thank you very much. Again, I think we are well on time. Again, thank you, our distinguished panelists, for your absolutely wonderful and valuable responses. We truly appreciate that. And I also would like to thank our respected audience for being part of this webinar. And we really hope that you found this webinar useful. And also, I would like to say that let us hope that this initiative, India Week initiative, will continue in the years to come, and we will be able to participate in the similar events and discuss our collaboration and partnership together between India and Australia, both at the individual and institutional levels. Have a nice day. Thank you very much. Good evening, good afternoon, depends on which time zone we are in. So that's the beauty of it. And again, thanks a lot for being part of this webinar. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Tatiana, for moderating the session. Thank you all for joining.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.